Happy anniversary to Genshin Impact, and it's not just any anniversary this time around, but the 5th one, half a decade. Year 5 marks a tremendous occasion for a new live service title, and while it's not quite as impressive as a game holding out for 10 or more, longtime gacha players will know that getting to this point alone is a big deal, especially given the fact that Genshin is still regarded by many as the largest and most commercially successful gacha game to this day. I think I speak for everyone when I say whether you love or hate the game, whether it's still giving you the same magic it always has, or if you no longer feel excited for it anymore, that Genshin truly changed the gacha industry for the better. Prior to 2020, gachas carried a reputation for being low-quality, bootleg mobile games designed to do the absolute bare minimum to take as much of your money as they can. The stigma is still kind of there, but from production value to gameplay experience and whatnot, given credit where it's due, they certainly elevated the bar on what a gacha game should be. The fact that most if not all major gacha games that came out or are about to come out have used Genshin Impact as the template of sorts to follow should attest to that. Arknights Enfield, Azure Promelia, Duet Night Abyss, Ananta, Neverness Deverness. People labeled them as Genshin Impact but with blank because Genshin was the one to push gacha from a niche audience into the mainstream consciousness. A lot is attributed to Genshin's influence, for better or worse, and as someone who has made content on this game going on 4 years now, I wanted to make a video discussing how much the game has changed in the span of 5 years, what has improved, what stayed the same, and what got worse, to give you my honest thoughts on if the game is worth playing if you're a potential newcomer, or worth continuing to play if you already are. Unlike most other gachas, where there's really only one central way to play and experience the game, a big part of what contributed to Genshin's enormous mainstream success was that it tried to cater towards all types of players, from the super sweaty tryhards who like to min-max everything, to the casual, laid-back Animal Crossing lifestyle people who like to kill time leisurely futzing about and such. In light of that, oftentimes the sentiment that manifests in one faction of the game almost never is shared by the other and vice versa. For context, my channel touches more on gameplay and characters, so naturally my audience would consist more of the people who like to gear up their units to be as powerful as they can and to take on the endgame as efficiently as possible, and less of the ones who spend their entire time customizing their Serenity pot. Be that as it may, I want to try to accommodate all possible facets of the game to give you as unbiased and comprehensive of an assessment as I can give. To say that Genshin has had a checkered past when it comes to improving the gameplay experience would be a very big understatement. Much of what people recall from internet discourse surrounding the game is usually some kind of public backlash or controversy that took place. For instance, a huge amount of goodwill was lost in early 2024 when Hoyo deemed it appropriate to provide every player 3 intertwined fates as an expression of gratitude for 3 years of Lantern Rite, aka 3 Chinese New Years. It seemed awfully miserly of a reward for such an occasion, and while technically it has nothing to do with the actual gameplay experience directly, accounting for the main way to obtain characters being to pull for them using a limited resource that can only be supplemented by way of microtransactions, stingy rewards do matter in the scope of a player's time spent playing the game. Gachas tend to be evaluated by how generous they are to free-to-play players. I figured this is a good point to start. Plainly speaking, I don't think magnanimity was ever a hallmark priority for Genshin Impact. In their defense, and not like other gachas that effectively force you to pull for every single character every week if you want to keep up with the meta, but assuming average luck and doing every possible thing that can give you primo gems, you're only gonna receive about give or take 60 to 70 pulls per patch, one patch being 6 weeks or approximately a month and a half. To reach the game's 5-star soft guarantee, you need about 80 to 90 pulls. So even if you do everything possible to collect Freemo gems, it takes more than a full version for you to have enough to pull a guaranteed 5-star. If you alternate between winning and losing a 50-50, you'll on average be able to pull for give or take 3 or 4 featured 5-stars over the course of a year. Now, according to the Genshin bookkeeping sheet, which documents all the free pulls you get from the very beginning of the game to now, you'll notice the trend hasn't really moved all that much. The game gives more or less the same amount of free pulls today that it used to in the past. Does the game require more characters to be owned than before? Because if it's the same as back in version 1 and 2, then Genshin not increasing their generosity isn't that big of a deal. I would say yes, we now have 3 endgame modes, each with their own set of constraints and restrictions. The need for a diverse and varied roster of characters to make teams around is measurably higher in the current day. More pressing is the fact that a non-negligible amount of free pulls are obtained by completing those endgame modes every time they refresh, so to get more characters you need more pulls. But to get more pulls you need more characters. Outside of the endgame though, the rest of the game's content ranging from story to events to navigating your day-to-day activities and whatnot require practically 0 characters, so if you're someone who's more into the narrative and storytelling side of Genshin and you already have your favorite units, free pulls are of little consequence. It comes down to what part of the game you enjoy the most. That being said, even the quote-unquote for fun players are negatively affected by not having access to the majority of characters in the game. Your starter Pokemon could be your favorite, but imagine playing through a Pokemon game having access to only 20 out of say 100 Pokemon for the first year of the game. Not a very enticing proposition, is it? And with Genshin having more characters than ever before, it could be disheartening to find out you won't be able to get them. So from a gacha point of view, the game is not improved whatsoever. If anything, circumstantially speaking, it may have gotten worse. On the subject of characters are in my opinion the strongest part of Genshin Impact and part of how the game was able to enter the larger video game sphere. Gachas in the past were primarily known for quantity over quality. They would pump out copious amounts of units, many of whom were basically cannon fodder or inventory clutter, typically amounting to nothing more than a sprite with some flavor text and an array of abilities. Exceptions apply of course. Some gachas gave voice acting to their units and some went as far as to make live 2D visuals or give background quests to their units. But it was Genshin that really took things to the next level. Each and every individual character was a fully fleshed out cast member with entire dialogues, personalities, visuals, designs, and roles in the story. From the most integral centerpieces in the main questline like the Archons to supposed filler characters that run a clothing boutique or dance in an opera theater, Hoyo spares no expense giving each unit a distinct thematic purpose in Genshin, and that is why this game is so memorable. When characters are more than just words or images on the screen, it gives people something to grow attached to. Genshin has so much fan art and fan-made content of its characters because the characters are rich in detail. Up until Nanland, the community was in almost unanimous agreement that its characters were well made and well put together. Even in the case of Nanland, while many people took issue with the rather unusual and incoherent visual designs of version 5's characters, in defense of Nanland, they're still visually striking and they have meaningful roles in their respective lines of work. Mavuika is every bit as nuanced and fleshed out of a character as the Archons who came before her. It's just her biker suit and motorcycle that leave a weird taste in people's mouths. I would argue character association and affiliation has always been Hoyo's strong suit. People not only love the heroes, but they also enjoy the side characters and especially the villains. The Fatui Harbingers bring about the same obsession among Genshin fans that the Akatsuki does to Naruto fans, and I'd say that's only gotten better over the years. Narratively speaking, we're about to reach a critical juncture in the story, one with how many important characters have been teased in version 6, along with very important characters like the Four Shades. Some of these units have been built up ever since the beginning of the game, and I'm optimistic towards the future of its characters from a storytelling point of view. Maybe soon Dainsleif will be playable. What about gameplay though? That part's a bit more divisive. It's no secret that in recent years, Genshin's power scaling has begun to ramp up. What made the game so successful in the mainstream was that for how stingy they were in providing free modes, the game practically had no power creep. Raiden Shogun was certainly stronger than most version 1 DPS units, and Nahida was stronger than most version 2 sub-DPS units, but generally speaking, you were able to perfectly clear Spiral Abyss using a 2-year-old team because not only was the game's difficulty not increasing year after year, which depending on who you ask might be a good or bad thing, but characters were also not beating over each other by that much either. Things are a bit different now. Mind you, Genshin's power creep is nowhere near as conspicuous or egregious as Honkai Star Rail's, and by far Universe is better than power creep in other gacha games. However, versions 4 through 6 present a considerable leap in power not just when compared to version 1 through 3, but amongst each other as well. You're under more pressure to have as many good characters as possible in a game that charges a month's rent in order to get all of them. I would say it's still more or less manageable though, but that only applies to if you're a long-time player. I can't imagine how difficult the game would be starting out fresh in 2025. It would take you more than a full year to achieve a perfect Stygian onslaught clear, and depending on the elements accessible, I'm fairly certain you can't even access the higher difficulties of Imaginarium Theater, let alone make an attempt at them. Yes, I'm aware Endgame is not meant to be accessed immediately, that defeats the purpose of Endgame, but that amount of time is simply too much to ask for a lot of players. Once more, people who care less about being a full sweat and choosing instead to treat Genshin like Animal Crossing are practically unaffected by it. Be that as it may, as an RPG with RPG stuff and RPG things you want to do, unless you're either extremely lucky and or you join at the perfect time to get the perfect units, I can't fathom how a new player is able to properly experience the full scope of the game in a reasonable time frame without dropping like half a grand on it. Spiral Abyss? Maybe. You could pull a broken 5-star unit and cobble together a working team, but Imaginarium and Stygian are almost out of the question. For some of you, it might appear like I'm zeroing in towards the gamer side of things and not the rest of Genshin, but understand that as an RPG, essentially everything you do, including things that aren't necessarily related to combat and progression, are indirectly motivated by combat and progression. The key reason players do events or do quests and stuff is to get resources to make their characters stronger so they can take on stronger enemies. Only a small fraction of players are willing to do exploration or tedious work if there wasn't a reward behind it. Having said that, however, one part of Genshin that unequivocally is improved over the years would be the world itself, in that you can actually check out the world. New players are blessed. You have Mondstadt, Liyue, Inazuma, Sumeru, Fontaine, Nanland, Dragonspine, and Konomiya, the Chasm, Sea of Bygone Eras, Ancient Sacred Mountain, Nordcry, Day 1 players had to experience everything bit by bit, but for those starting out right now, you quite literally, unexaggeratedly, have one of the best free-to-play open-world exploration games of all damn time. There is so much exploration, so much to check out and see, so much to collect, and so many things to kill, that it likely borders on 300 hours of gameplay, possibly more. The sheer breadth of exploration content in Genshin, ranging from scenery to puzzles to questing, has to be overwhelming. If you're someone who enjoyed Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you're gonna have an amazing time with this game. That is one part of Genshin that I think deserves acclaim. This game is gorgeous and varied. It kinda sucks that this game doesn't have legacy events the same way they have in HSR and Wuthering Waves, because I think Genkanomiya would be way more enjoyable if the Three Realms Gateway offering event was still in effect, but that aside, you'll still have more than enough to do. Providing you don't care too much about character progression and just want to check stuff out, I could not recommend Genshin Impact more. Not a single other gacha game reaches the same heights of exploration that Genshin does, so I suppose even if it will take you a year to fully reach endgame, on the bright side you'll have plenty of things to do during that time. Day 1 players had to run into the content wall every single patch. Meanwhile, new players get to enjoy 5 years of content all at once. Quality of life is also one thing that has improved a fair bit. Slow it may have been, especially in contrast to competing titles, I'll acknowledge that Genshin is definitely moving in the right direction at least. I'm not going to list off everything they've done over the years, but the game is in a much better spot now than it was before in terms of user experience, with many more conveniences that make the game less tedious or bothersome to complete. There are still quite a few things that Genshin really needs to address, but for example, stuff like allowing us to see the force stat of a 3-line artifact without having to actually put XP into it was a monumental improvement to the artifact grinding experience. Couple more improvements like that and the game will be in great shape. As for what to expect in regards to Genshin Impact going forward, I really don't know. I think the main problem with this game is that a lot of players, myself included, expected a lot more from it than it was able to deliver on. In my video on why Genshin Impact is losing popularity, I talked about how the game will never die per se, but it's disheartening to see what it could have been. I still retain the same sentiment. Genshin had the potential to be so much more than what it is. Whether a more elaborate combat system or a more nuanced and comprehensive endgame experience, or perhaps a better intertwining of the casual side of things, exploration, questing, and serenity plot, with the sweaty side of things, endgame content and character optimization, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. All the same, it would be foolish and needlessly cynical to disregard what Genshin did manage to do. Yes, the bad stuff about it, the terrible progression system, the subpar endgame, the expensive units, the lack of generosity and free stuff and whatnot, do lay a damper on the game's experience, and you're perfectly justified to criticize and even dislike the game because of it. Heaven knows I have. But that aside, Genshin Impact is a pretty solid game all things considered. My suggestion to anyone watching, whether you're a day 1 player losing interest in the game or someone looking to get into it for the first time, is to adapt your expectations. I don't blame people for doing this, as I'm guilty of it myself, but people have a tendency to look at things in a certain way and then refuse to change or adjust their perspective on it for one reason or another. However, there is merit in shifting one's attitude in a more positive light. When I was talking to some friends about Genshin, one of them mentioned how amazing it must feel to start the game now compared to day 1. Initially, I was like, what the hell is he talking about? The game would be horrible to play now. You missed all those years of limited characters, events, and time-gated resources that you'll never be able to make up for. Then again, you also never had to deal with all the crappy stuff too, and when accounting for stuff like the near limitless amount of exploration, that's definitely something to give credit to. Genshin Impact has dried out for a lot of people, but if I were to be objective, I think it's a great game to play casually. I speak to both long-time and new players that this game is meant to be played casually and for fun. I'm forever going to be talking about meta and gameplay and stuff because that's just the kind of player I am, but trust me when I say the less seriously you take Genshin, the more fun you'll have. People who play their favorite characters regardless of how good they are, enjoy the events of their friends, mess around in the teapot, and ugly cry during the Fontaine Archon quest are the real winners of this game. So is Genshin Impact better or worse 5 years later? I would say it's different, neither better nor worse. The game has changed a lot since 2020, but in some ways has stayed the same too. Then again, us players have changed a lot, I'm sure. Who knows, but either way, if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you like to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Genshin Impact discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
On my mark! You asked!
As you wish, Ming.